What's happening, folks? Back with another reaction, back with another J-drama soundtrack, and this time we're going to listen to a tune from the Lucky 7 score for the first time. Now, Lucky 7 is a show I've known for a long time. It came out 2012. I either saw it that year or maybe the year after that, but I've definitely known it for more than a decade. However, I've only recently gotten the soundtrack, so while I know tunes from the show, I've rewatched it a couple times since I first saw it. I don't know the soundtrack as comprehensively and completely as I do for a show like Hanayori Dango, or even a show like Ouroboros, which came out a couple years after this, but which I got the soundtrack for much earlier. Now, the soundtrack is composed by Tim Wynn, which you might observe is not a Japanese name. I don't really have any information about him, other than to note that he's seemingly taken from outside the typical J-drama universe, meaning there's a number of composers, Japanese composers, who I've heard on multiple J-drama soundtracks, but I've never seen the name Tim Wynn before or after this soundtrack. So either way, I think it's a very good soundtrack. The show itself, which I think Dawn has seen, I've talked to Michaela about it, it's a private detective show, but that's only scratching the surface, meaning there's a lot of personal character storylines for the people in the detective agency, including main star Matsumoto Jun, who is Domyoji in Hanayori Dango, and Eita, who comes from, for me, Nodome Cantabile. That's the first show I saw him in. And in fact, Domyoji's older sister in Hanayori Dango, played by, I think it's Nakano Matsushima, she is in this show also, and there's even a couple of cheeky reference jokes to the idea of like, wait, you guys act like your brother and sister, so I think there's a bit of, meta comedy at play. But yeah, there's a bit of actor crossover for shows I had already seen, which is of course what originally made me curious, because I remember seeing the title sequence shot of all the people standing there, which you can see here, and this is the special episode which came out after the only season. It was sort of a cinematic or hour and a half long conclusion episode following the regular show. In any case, the point is, when I saw the title shot, I was like, oh wait, like it's got multiple people I'm familiar with from some of my favorite shows. I've got to see this. So yes, it has personal character lines or personal character storylines. It has a lot of human quality to it, meaning they try to solve cases in the ways that benefit the most people. In some cases, specifically for the person who hired them, but in other cases, for other people around the investigation. So it's a very human and moral show, but there is also a lot of action and a lot of fistfights and sequences that require crazy stunt work, and I think it's really well choreographed, and the stunt work is excellent when it comes to the action element of the show. So in that regard, we're going to start with a track called Showdown, which sounds like there's about to be a fight, maybe not necessarily a physical one, it could be verbal and mental, and I won't spoil too much, but there are two of the main characters who are often at loggerheads, as they say, often arguing and in each other's faces. But yes, there's a deep intensity to the tune, and there is some percussive energy, but I wouldn't say it's frenetic or kinetic. It's not a really fast-paced and pulse-pounding type of track. It's more like there's a heavy air of suspense, like something is about to happen, not necessarily that it's happening now. So I think the title of the track fits well. Let's give it a listen. This is Showdown by Tim Wynn from the Lucky 7 soundtrack 2012. like I said, it really does suggest there's about to be trouble afoot, or maybe the resolution of trouble through the use of fisticuffs if necessary. And fair to say, it's not like the show is, mindless fistfights or anything like that. I hope I didn't give a wrong impression, but there is a lot of physicality, and I want to once again highlight the performances in general of both Matsumoto Jun and Eita, but in particular, they are involved in a lot of the physical action that takes place in some of the episodes. And the stunt work and choreography is just really great. So, shout out to their performances more broadly, but even more narrowly to their physical acting and the scene construction and blocking and cinematography and so on. It's just all really well done, and I think this track is reflective of the gravity of a lot of those physical scenes, which don't just involve fistfights. Sometimes they're chase scenes, sometimes they're using the environment around you, jumping up on a wall and then grabbing a railing and, pulling yourself up so that you can get to a place where you're not vulnerable. There's a lot of dynamic physical interaction in some of these scenes. Though, again, it is a detective show, and there is detecting and the finding of clues, the asking of questions, and indeed some of the other members, including Nakarisa. I should have mentioned her too when I first saw the title cover shot of the show, because it was like, oh wait, isn't she in My Boss My Hero? And it's a smaller part, but it is true. I first saw her in My Boss My Hero, where she plays a very tough student who doesn't let Makio just bully anyone or get away with being wrong about something, or indeed out of time in music is always the scene I think of. But yeah, so there were people from the first 3 J-dramas I had ever seen all in one show. Obviously I was going to be interested in that, and it turns out it's a very good show on top of that, with an excellent soundtrack. So shout out to Tim Wynn. I'm happy to finally have this. I'm probably going to do one more reaction to the same soundtrack in this batch, and more in the coming weeks and months, so hopefully you're here for it. Luca will probably be here for it too. Let me know what you think, and maybe by then she won't be biting my thumb anymore. Peace.